On Thursday, May 23, 2019, a 7-year-old girl disappeared in a remote community in Mexico without anyone being able to explain with certainty what had happened. She had spent the day playing near her house, as she usually did, but by evening, she did not return. Her absence was noticed when there was no clear trace of where she had gone. What began as a neighborhood search turned into a massive operation that lasted 7 days. Imprecise testimonies, discarded clues, and multiple lines of investigation marked the development of the case until a discovery completely changed its course and left everyone stunned. This is the chronological reconstruction of the events surrounding the case of a Mexican girl from the early hours until the closure of the investigation. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us once again on this channel. Before we begin, we invite you to subscribe to the channel if you find this type of content useful or interesting. We would also like you to let us know in the comments where you are watching us from. We like to know how far these stories reach and from which places in the world you are joining us. We ask you to follow this case with empathy and respect. And if you consider it important, share the video so that more people learn about what happened. Spreading these facts is also a way to raise awareness. Now, let's begin. Itzel Quiroa Cerratos was born on January 3, 2012 in San Luis Rio, Colorado, Sonora. She was the daughter of Miguel Ángel Quiroa and Maria Luisa Cerratos, and from her early years, she grew up in a stable family environment with several siblings within a community where interaction among neighbors was frequent and everyday. At the time of the events we will narrate today, Itzel was 7 years old. Her life unfolded with the normalcy typical of a girl her age. She attended school, spent time with her family, and shared long play sessions with other children in the neighborhood. There were no indications that she faced extraordinary or unusual situations. Her routine was marked by simple and repetitive activities typical of childhood, and her main interest was to socialize, play, and enjoy her free time. The family dynamics were organized around her mother's work, who left home early in the mornings, and the daily care provided within the domestic and community environment. Until that moment, her life had passed without events that significantly altered her family or social environment. Everyday life marked her days, and there were no precedents to foresee an abrupt change in that normality. Itzel's daily life unfolded within a simple and predictable routine. Her days were marked by attending school and the time she spent in her immediate surroundings, mainly in the company of other children from the neighborhood. Like many children her age, she found in play her main form of distraction and socialization, using the spaces near her home as usual meeting points. The neighborhood where she lived allowed for an active community dynamic. It was common for the children to go out and play during the day, especially when there were no school activities. These days unfolded under the indirect supervision of the adults in the area, who, although they did not constantly watch, were attentive to the presence of the children and could easily recognize any unusual situation. Itzel regularly participated in these activities and was part of the group of children who gathered to play. One of the places she often visited was a canal near her home. This site was known by the neighbors and the children themselves, who frequently visited it as part of their recreational activities. Itzel liked to go to that place, whether alone or with her friends, and her presence there was not unusual for those who knew her. At home, Itzel maintained a close relationship with her family. She spent time with her siblings and was described as an active child with her own initiative and a personality that sometimes led her to make decisions on her own. There were no previous instances of prolonged absences or situations that would cause alarm. Itzel usually stayed within known schedules and spaces, returning home after playing and generally following the usual routines of her day-to-day life. desintasar. Thus, we arrive at Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. That day began as usual in the life of Itzel and her family. In the early hours of the morning, around 5, her mother left the house to go to work. Before leaving, she left Itzel inside the home where the girl remained resting. The woman said that at that moment the little girl was wearing long denim pants. As the hours passed, the family routine unfolded without any surprises. That Thursday there were no school classes, so the children in the neighborhood stayed at home or went out to play from early hours. As the morning went on, activity in the area increased, and several children began to gather in the street and nearby spaces to play. Itzel, as on other occasions, joined in the games with other children. During the morning, she was seen in the company of her neighborhood friends, participating in recreational activities typical for her age. Itzel moved within spaces familiar to her, without straying from the areas she regularly frequented. During the afternoon, the girl was also in the company of her older sister and other children at the canal near her home, which, as we mentioned, was a place they frequently visited. At a certain point, a neighbor came for her children, which caused Itzel's older sister to leave the place with them. The girl, who did not always follow her sister's instructions, decided to stay alone in the area. It was in that context that visual contact with the girl was lost. Some neighbors mentioned that they had seen her wearing denim shorts and a green blouse, which would indicate that at some point during the day, Itzel changed clothes. This detail became relevant later when trying to reconstruct her movements. What is certain is that this was the last moment someone saw her for sure, and upon noticing her absence, the neighbors began to search for her. Around 6 in the evening, Itzel's mother returned home after finishing her workday. Upon arriving, she immediately noticed unusual activity in the neighborhood. Neighbors and some of their children were searching for Itzel. They quickly informed her that they hadn't seen her for several hours. Out of concern, the mother began asking the neighbors what had happened during the day. The answers coincided on one point. The girl has been playing with other children and at some point in the afternoon simply stopped being seen. One of the key testimonies was from a child in the neighborhood who stated that Itzel had mentioned she had to go see a woman that day, whom she identified only as Doña. No further information was provided about this person, nor was it clearly established if it was someone known to the family or the community. Immediately, the parents began a search on their own. They went around the neighborhood, asked door to door, and checked yards and common areas, hoping to find the girl or get some information to help locate her. Some neighbors joined spontaneously, expanding the search to nearby streets and areas close to the homes. During those first hours, the information was confusing and fragmented. Possible changes of clothes and different places where the girl was last seen were mentioned, but there was no conclusive information to establish a clear search line. Even so, the family and neighbors continued to search the area, trying to cover as much ground as possible before nightfall. When they did not get results, the parents decided to go to the authorities to report the disappearance. Given the lack of precise information about Itzel's whereabouts and the time that had already passed since she was last seen, an Amber Alert was issued to expedite her location and disseminate her information among the population. In parallel, search operations were organized in the area where the girl was last seen. To these efforts were added members of the authorities and a considerable number of neighbors who actively participated by going through streets, vacant lots, yards, and open spaces. It is estimated that around 200 people collaborated in these actions during the first few days. The search was mainly concentrated in the area of San Luis Rio, Colorado, extending to various points considered of interest. Nearby areas to the minor's home were reviewed, places frequented by neighborhood children, and spaces that could pose some risk. Community participation was constant, with groups organizing to cover different sectors. During these initial actions, new data began to emerge that were incorporated into the search lines. Some neighbors reported that the same afternoon Itzel disappeared. An unknown white van had been seen lurking around the area where the children played. Although a direct connection to the disappearance could not be established, this element was considered relevant and was shared among those participating in the operations. Despite the initial deployment and the number of people involved, the first days did not yield positive results. No belongings of the minor were found, nor was any information obtained that would clearly establish what happened after her disappearance. The investigation continued to progress as more testimonies were gathered and the search areas were expanded. As the search efforts progressed, one of the points that drew the most attention was a canal located near Itzel's home, as it was the last place where her sister had contact with her. Given this information, the authorities and support groups conducted patrols around the canal. The banks were inspected and searches were conducted in different sections, including areas that were difficult to access. Divers were also used to check deeper parts, due to the possibility that the girl might have accidentally fallen into the water. The family requested that the canal be drained to facilitate a complete inspection of the area. However, this request was not granted. The authorities considered that the actions taken up to that point were sufficient to rule out that line, so the canal was not drained. In parallel, the search was expanded to other nearby points. Houses, yards, vacant lots, and unpopulated areas were checked. The operations extended both in urban areas and open spaces, with the aim of ruling out any possible location where the girl might be found. Despite the effort deployed, no clues were found that would allow concrete progress. No personal belongings or clear signs were found to help reconstruct Itzel's path after she was last seen. As the hours passed, the investigation increasingly relied on testimonies and indirect data due to the absence of physical evidence. In the days following the disappearance, various elements began to circulate that were analyzed as possible clues. Among them, Itzel's mother reported that she had access to security camera recordings in which she was able to identify her daughter playing with other girls shortly before 1 in the afternoon. A video circulated, released by a local media outlet, showing several girls playing in the street. In the footage, there was a young girl whose clothing did not seem to match the description given by both the mother and the neighbors. While some pointed out that Itzel was wearing denim pants or shorts in the video, a girl appeared to be wearing a dress or skirt, which raised doubts about whether it was really her. These inconsistencies were compounded by questions about where the video was recorded. Some people pointed out that the street where Itzel lived was unpaved, while in the images a paved street was observed. Others mentioned that it could be a nearby area where relatives lived. Despite these versions, there was no official statement confirming or dismissing the authenticity of the images as a valid lead. Another material that caused confusion was a video recorded in Hermosillo, Sonora, in which a girl with a notable physical resemblance to Itzel was seen walking with a man. This recording was reviewed by the authorities, who later reported that the girl was not Itzel and that the man appearing in the images was not related to her disappearance. These reports, although they were disseminated and analyzed during the search, did not lead to concrete results. Far from clarifying the situation, several of them generated expectations that were later dismissed, forcing the authorities and the family to return to the initial points of investigation, still without a solid lead indicating the girl's whereabouts. While the search continued without concrete results, Itzel's family began receiving phone calls from unknown people. In these contacts, the callers claimed to have information about the girl's whereabouts or asserted that she was kidnapped. However, all the calls had one element in common: the demand for money in exchange for supposed information or the return of the child. The amounts requested were high and beyond the family's financial reach. None of these communications provided verifiable information or led to a real lead. As time went by, it became clear that these were extortion attempts taking advantage of the vulnerability and desperation the parents were experiencing. Due to the lack of progress, an anonymous donor offered a reward of $1,500 to anyone who could provide useful information leading to the location of Itzel. This offer was spread with the hope of encouraging citizen collaboration and obtaining some information that would allow progress in the investigation. Despite this, no concrete information was received that could be confirmed by the authorities. The calls and messages continued to generate momentary expectations, but none of them translated into real progress. The investigation continued without a clear direction, and as the days passed, the chances of a favorable outcome began to diminish. As the days went by, the search efforts continued without significant progress. The authorities maintained operations at various points in San Luis Rio, Colorado, extending the patrols to desert areas, canals, vacant lots, and less traveled areas. Each new day involved reviewing already explored areas and adding others considered of interest as isolated reports emerged. Trained dogs were used to track possible traces of the girl's past. These operations were carried out both in urban areas and open spaces, including zones near the canal and peripheral sectors of the city. Despite the deployment, no clear traces were found that would allow for a precise reconstruction of what happened after the disappearance. IEBC. The neighbors continued to collaborate actively, participating in brigades and sharing any information that could be useful. However, the data remained fragmentary and in many cases contradictory. No belongings of the girl appeared, nor physical signs indicating a specific point to direct efforts. As 7 days passed since the disappearance, uncertainty became constant for the family and the community. The lack of results began to create an increasingly complex scenario in which the initial hypothesis lost strength and the chances of finding Itzel alive diminished. It was not until Thursday, May 30th, 2019, 7 days after Itzel's disappearance, that a discovery was made. In the afternoon, the body of a young girl was found on a property located approximately 50 meters from the canal where the girl had last been seen. The place was within an area that had already been previously searched during the search operations. The body was partially buried, which immediately caught the attention of the authorities and the neighbors because that area had been inspected in previous days, even with the support of search dogs. The proximity to the canal reinforced the importance that point had from the beginning, although up to that moment nothing out of the ordinary had been detected. After the discovery, it was confirmed that it was Itzel. The news had a strong impact on the community. which had actively participated in the search for a week. The fact that the body appeared in a previously searched site raised immediate questions. Doubts arose about whether it had remained hidden in the place from the beginning, or if it was placed there later, taking advantage of the knowledge of the areas already searched. This possibility became a relevant element in the investigation, as it suggested the involvement of someone familiar with the progress of the search. After the discovery, the body was transported for forensic studies, while the authorities focused their efforts on reconstructing what happened during the days following the disappearance and identifying those responsible. The result determined that Itzel died from suffocation by asphyxiation. During the examination, sand residues were also found in the nasal passage, a fact that was considered relevant to reconstruct the circumstances in which the crime occurred. It was also confirmed that she had been a victim of sexual abuse before losing her life. The forensic reports indicated that the death occurred on the same day of her disappearance, ruling out the possibility that she had remained alive in the days following. This finding allowed them to narrow down that the crime was committed a few hours after she was last seen. One day after the discovery of Itzel's body, the authorities made the only arrest directly linked to the case. It was a man identified as Aaron Guadalupe, 29 years old, who worked as a private security guard and had a criminal record related to previous offenses, including drug possession and robbery with violence. According to the information gathered, the man made a confession in which he admitted to being responsible for taking Itzel's life. According to his statement, he had observed Itzel for several days and had begun to establish a relationship of apparent trust with her. He even mentioned that he had given her a nickname, which showed that the contact between them had not been coincidental. The detainee stated that he took advantage of the moment when the girl was alone to take her, sexually abuse her, and subsequently take her life. This confession was made without, according to reports, a prolonged prior interrogation, which drew attention due to the speed with which the man acknowledged his responsibility. It was also confirmed that Aaron Guadalupe had actively participated in the searches conducted after Itzel's disappearance. From the first days, the man joined the patrols organized by neighbors and authorities, collaborating in different areas where efforts to locate her were concentrated. His presence in the operations had not initially raised suspicions. On the contrary, he was seen as just another neighbor joining the community efforts. He showed constant interest in the progress of the search and stayed attentive to the information circulating about the places already checked and the areas still pending inspection. The fact that he had been part of the search groups raised the possibility that he had detailed knowledge about the sites that had already been checked, as well as the times when the searches were conducted. This circumstance gained special significance because Itzel's body was found in an area that had already been inspected previously. The coincidence reinforced the hypothesis that the perpetrator might have used that information to hide or move the body without raising suspicion, although it was not possible to establish with certainty the exact moment when this occurred. With all this information, Aaron Guadalupe was placed at the disposal of the corresponding authorities and was charged with several crimes related to Itzel's death. Among the charges he faced were sexual abuse, femicide, and burial of corpses, all considered highly serious within the legal framework. Due to the nature of the crimes and the criminal record of the detainee, it was estimated that the possible sentence could reach up to 102 years in prison. This projection was based both on the accumulation of charges and on the prior criminal history already recorded in his file. While his legal situation was being defined, Aaron Guadalupe was admitted to a local detention center under preventive detention. For security reasons, he was placed in an isolation area separate from the rest of the prison population. This measure was taken due to the risk to his physical integrity, given the type of crime he was accused of. During that period, the legal process advanced according to the established timelines, awaiting the next judicial stages. However, the course of the case would be unexpectedly interrupted a few days later when an event occurred that once again changed the direction of the investigation. On June 4, 2019, when the judicial process was still in an initial stage, Aaron Guadalupe was found dead inside the detention center where he was held in pretrial detention. Documentaries. The discovery occurred during a routine inspection conducted by the custody staff. According to the available information, the man was found in the bathroom of his cell, hanging with a piece of blanket. Authorities indicated that he had taken advantage of an approximate 15-minute period during which he was not under direct surveillance to take his own life. After the discovery, the corresponding protocols for this type of incident were initiated. The official version indicated that there was no third-party involvement. The death of Aaron Guadalupe prevented the judicial process from advancing to later stages, such as a trial where evidence, testimonies, and responsibilities would be formally evaluated. The circumstances of his death raised questions among some sectors, mainly due to the short time that had passed since his entry into the penitentiary center and the fact that he was under custody. However, beyond the doubts that arose, decisives in capelotaren que arose, the death of the detainee abruptly closed the possibility of obtaining more information directly from him about the events, including details about the time elapsed between Itzel's disappearance and the discovery of her body. The absence of a complete judicial process left several points unanswered. It was not possible to precisely determine what happened to Itzel's body in the days following her disappearance, nor to definitively establish when it was placed in the location where it was eventually found. It was also not possible to delve into other possible links or responsibilities as the investigation focused solely on the detainee. The closure of the case meant that no additional charges would be filed, nor would the inquiries continue. The investigation file was archived as there were no more formally accused individuals or open lines that could proceed without the statement of the main suspect. For Itzel's family, this meant the end of the legal process without a judicial sentence. The lack of a trial and a conviction left a feeling of incomplete resolution, as not all the instances that normally allow for clarifying a case of this nature were exhausted. With the case file closed, the case became one of those where the judicial truth was limited by circumstances, without fully reconstructing what happened or providing a definitive answer from the justice system. This case highlighted both the community response to an emergency and the difficulties investigations face when processes are abruptly interrupted. Without a verdict and with pending questions, the case was recorded as another in which the justice system failed to provide a definitive answer.
And well, dear listeners, that's it for today's case.
Thank you for joining us throughout this informative journey and for taking the time to learn about the facts with attention and respect. If you find this content interesting, we invite you to subscribe and follow the channel for more analysis and stories constructed from a rigorous and chronological approach. See you in the next video.